I'm a 34-year-old woman, married to my husband Jason, who's 36. We've been together for nearly a decade and decided early that we didn't want kids. We both have demanding jobs, we love to travel, and we like the kind of quiet weekends that don't involve diaper bags or babysitters. It's a decision that made sense for us, but to my mother, Linda, it might as well have been a personal attack. Ever since our wedding, she's treated the idea of grandchildren as her next big life goal. The first time she joked about saving all her baby blankets for the real purpose, I laughed it off. But it stopped being a joke after the 10th "you'll regret waiting" conversation. At first, Jason tried to smooth things over, saying maybe she just needed time to adjust. Time didn't help. When I finally told her directly that we weren't planning to have kids at all, she froze like I'd confessed a crime. She cried for days, telling my father Mark that she felt robbed of her purpose. My dad quietly told me he understood our choice but didn't want to argue with her. He's always been the kind of man who avoids conflict until it burns a hole through the wall. The next family dinner after that was awkward. My younger sister Emma, 3 years younger, always eager to win Mom's approval, put on a bright smile and said, "Well, don't worry, Mom. I'll give you all the grandkids you want." It got a big laugh from Linda, and that became the pattern from then on. Every conversation seemed to turn into a comparison. Linda would drop comments like, "My friend Carol just became a grandma, such a blessing," or, "You know, Emma just has that natural motherly glow." Meanwhile, I was apparently too focused on work. Thanksgiving was the worst. We hosted that year, and my mother stood to make a toast. She raised her glass to future babies, claiming it was a joke when the silence hit the table. Jason pulled me aside later and told me it crossed a line. He was right, but I was already used to it. After that, I decided to draw a boundary. I called my mother and asked her, calmly, to stop bringing up children every time we spoke. She immediately turned it around on me, saying I was selfish and ungrateful, that I didn't understand what family meant. Then Emma got engaged. Her fiancé Tom was a polite guy with a stable job and a big extended family. Linda adored him from the first meeting. Suddenly, all her energy went into wedding planning. She'd call me with updates about Emma's dress, Emma's flowers, Emma's menu. It was like she'd found a new favorite daughter overnight. I didn't fight it. Jason and I started skipping most family gatherings, choosing smaller visits with my dad instead. It was easier that way. 2 years later, Emma announced she was pregnant. Mom cried like she'd been handed a miracle. She threw a huge baby shower with matching decorations, a caterer, and more gifts than I'd seen at Emma's actual wedding. I remembered how Mom once criticized me for spending money on myself, but apparently it was different when it came to her blessing. After that, the balance in our family completely shifted. Every phone call from Linda became a story about Emma's cravings, Emma's doctor visits, Emma's nursery. She would soften when talking to me only if it gave her a chance to brag about finally becoming a grandmother. I kept my distance, but even from far away, it was clear something wasn't right. At a quiet dinner one night, Emma admitted she and Tom were already struggling with bills. She brushed it off, saying they'd figure it out once the baby arrived. Mom just smiled and said, "Family always finds a way." That was the moment I realized how much my mother's dream of being a grandmother had blinded her. She didn't see the cracks forming right in front of her. And deep down, I knew those cracks were going to spread further than any of us expected. When my niece Lily was born, it was like my mother had discovered a second youth. She practically moved into Emma's house that first week, carrying grocery bags, cleaning supplies, and enough baby clothes to fill a small store. I remember stopping by to drop off flowers and finding her scrubbing bottles while Emma scrolled through her phone on the couch. My mother didn't mind. She said this was her dream come true. Within days, she had declared herself the official babysitter. She made a big announcement at Sunday dinner, proudly explaining that she'd be there whenever Emma needed. She said it like she was applying for a job she'd already gotten. My dad, Mark, looked uneasy, but he didn't argue. At first, things looked picture perfect. Emma posted smiling photos of the three of them at the park and captioned them with things like 3 generations of love. But behind the scenes, cracks started to show fast. Tom lost his job a month after Lily was born. Emma's maternity pay ran out. Bills started piling up, and she began depending more on my parents for help. One night, close to midnight, my phone buzzed. It was Emma. She said rent was due, and they were short. She wanted to borrow money, just for this month. I told her I could help her figure out a budget, maybe look at cutting expenses, but I couldn't just send money. She hung up after saying she'd figure it out another way. The next morning, my mother called. I didn't even have to check the caller ID. She was furious. She told me Emma had cried all night, that I'd turned my back on family. I didn't argue, but I reminded her that giving advice wasn't cruelty. It was trying to help responsibly. She ended the call by saying, "You'll understand real love when you have children of your own." After that, the babysitting became full-time. Emma told my mom they couldn't afford daycare until things improved. My mom didn't hesitate. She started going to Emma's house every weekday at 7 a.m. and often stayed until after dinner. My dad suggested she scale back, but she said she couldn't let Emma struggle. By the 3rd month, the routine had consumed her. She'd wake up early, pack food, clean Emma's kitchen, wash bottles, fold laundry, and take Lily for walks while Emma rested or went to part-time shifts. My dad stopped trying to argue about it. He just made sure she had gas in the car and cooked dinner for himself. When I invited my parents over for dinner one Friday, my mom declined, saying she was too busy with Lily's nap schedule. I noticed she'd started missing nearly every family event unless it involved Emma or the baby. Even our phone calls had changed. Every conversation turned into updates about Emma's exhaustion, Lily's new milestones, or how busy young mothers have it these days. A few times, I tried to remind her that she deserved rest too. She brushed it off, saying, "You wouldn't understand. It's different when it's your own blood." My dad started venting quietly when she wasn't around. He said he barely saw her anymore. "She spends more time at that house than in her own," he told me. I could tell he wasn't angry, just tired. When his birthday rolled around, I hosted dinner at my place. I cooked, Jason set the table, and we hoped it'd be a normal family night. Mom showed up late, carrying Lily on her hip. She didn't bring a gift for my dad, just laughed and said, "This little angel is your real present." My dad smiled politely, but the disappointment was written all over his face. Halfway through dinner, Emma arrived uninvited. She placed Lily in a portable seat and started chatting about how my mother saved her thousands by babysitting full-time. She spoke loudly, like she wanted everyone to hear what a devoted grandmother she had. My mom smiled proudly, unaware or maybe unwilling to see how much she was being taken advantage of. After they left, my dad stayed behind a few extra minutes. He looked at the empty seat where my mother had been bouncing Lily and shook his head. "She's running herself into the ground," he said. "She won't slow down until she collapses." I didn't have an answer for him. I just cleaned the dishes and realized that somehow, without even noticing, my mother had turned into the full-time nanny Emma couldn't afford. And while everyone praised her for being so selfless, the truth was, she'd traded her freedom for a role she thought she wanted, and no one in the family seemed ready to admit it. By the time spring came, she'd stopped calling me just to talk. Every conversation started with, "You'll never believe what Lily did today." It didn't matter if it was a new word or a new bib. Everything revolved around Emma's baby. My mother had always dreamed of being a grandmother, but it was starting to look less like a dream and more like a job she could never clock out of. And deep down, everyone knew where this was heading, except her. It didn't take long before my mother's constant running around finally caught up with her. One afternoon, Emma called my dad in a panic because Mom had fainted while carrying groceries into the house. She hit the floor hard enough that Emma called an ambulance. Thankfully, she was fine, just dehydrated, the doctor said, but they kept her overnight for observation. When I visited her at the hospital, she was already talking about how she couldn't wait to get home because Emma needed her. I tried reminding her the doctor told her to rest, but it went in one ear and out the other. The next morning, she checked herself out and went straight back to Emma's house with bags of groceries. My dad tried to talk sense into her, but she brushed him off, saying Lily couldn't be left alone and Emma couldn't handle everything. It became clear that my mother had slipped into a role she couldn't separate herself from. Meanwhile, Emma had started relying on her for everything: errands, meals, cleaning, babysitting. She'd drop Lily off without warning and disappear for hours, claiming she needed to run quick errands that somehow always lasted half a day. The whole situation started showing cracks in other areas too. My dad told me quietly that their savings were going down faster than expected. He'd seen a few withdrawals Linda couldn't explain at first, then admitted she'd been covering Emma's rent just until things improved. I noticed Emma's social media told a different story. She was posting pictures from spa days and brunches with friends while telling everyone she couldn't afford daycare. I didn't say anything right away, but when Dad asked me to talk to her before things got worse, I agreed. I stopped by one afternoon while my mom was folding laundry. Emma was sitting on the couch, watching TV with takeout containers on the table. I tried to keep it civil, explaining that Mom was wearing herself out. Emma didn't take it well. She called it helping family and said Mom wanted to be there. Things escalated fast when I pointed out that Mom had been in the hospital from exhaustion. Emma snapped, claiming I was jealous because she had a real family, and I didn't. Mom froze in the kitchen, torn between us. My dad walked in a few minutes later, clearly tired of the fighting, and told Mom she needed to stop letting Emma take advantage. It was the first time I'd ever heard him raise his voice in years. Mom didn't argue, but I could tell it shook her. A few days later, she called me crying early in the morning. She said she didn't know how to stop helping Emma without feeling like she was abandoning her. I drove over to her house, and she asked me to come with her to Emma's to talk it out. When we got there, the house was a mess. Dishes piled up, toys scattered everywhere. Mom started cleaning automatically, like muscle memory. Emma was in her bedroom on her phone, barely looking up. That's when I saw the laundry basket. My mom's clothes were mixed in with Emma's. She'd been staying there overnight more often than I realized. Mom looked exhausted. I told her to sit down, and I told Emma flat out that things had gone too far. Emma rolled her eyes and said she didn't have any choice. Then she admitted Tom had moved out after a fight about money. She couldn't pay daycare and didn't want to lose her job, so she needed Mom's help a little longer. It was the final straw for Dad. When he heard about it, he told Mom that if she didn't stop this pattern, Emma would never stand on her own feet. He reminded her they'd both worked hard for years to enjoy retirement, not to raise another child. Mom still didn't pull away right away, but the guilt was starting to eat at her. She started snapping at Emma over small things: dirty dishes, forgotten bills, empty gas tanks. I think it was the first time Emma saw her patience start to fade. Then one night, everything boiled over. Mom came home late after another full day at Emma's, and Dad confronted her about their bank account again. He showed her how much money had gone to Emma over the last few months. When Mom realized it was more than she expected, she broke down crying. She admitted she felt trapped, that every time she tried to stop helping, Emma would guilt her into coming back. The next day, Mom decided to take a break and stay home. Emma didn't take it well. She started calling nonstop, leaving voicemails saying she was overwhelmed. By the third day, she showed up unannounced, handed Lily over to my mom, and walked out without a word. That was the moment my dad finally lost his patience. He packed Lily's diaper bag, drove her back to Emma's, and left her on the porch with a note that said, "This isn't our responsibility." It was harsh, but it worked, at least for a few days. Emma didn't call for a week. When she finally did, she was furious, claiming Dad had abandoned her and made her feel unsafe. Mom cried again and said she just wanted peace. I stopped by later that night. Mom was sitting on the couch, staring at her phone, waiting for a message that never came. My dad told me quietly he might have to step in financially just to keep the peace, but he knew if he did, it would start the same cycle all over again. It was clear by then that my mother's need to feel needed, and Emma's ability to use it, wasn't going away on its own. Something bigger would have to break before either of them saw how deep this problem really was. After Dad drew the line, there was a strange calm for a while. Emma didn't call or visit, and Mom finally started spending full days at home again. She cooked dinner, went for walks, even joined my dad in the backyard for coffee. It almost felt normal, but that peace didn't last long. A few weeks later, Dad checked their bank account and noticed money missing again. At first, he thought he'd miscalculated, but when he looked closer, there were withdrawals he didn't recognize. He confronted Mom, and after a long pause, she admitted she'd been covering Emma's rent again. She promised it was just this once, that Emma was in a tight spot. When I stopped by later that week, she was acting cheerful, too cheerful. She talked nonstop about how Lily was starting to talk, how Emma had found part-time work, how things were finally looking up. But Dad pulled me aside before I left and told me Emma hadn't paid back a single dollar. It didn't take long for the same cycle to start again. Emma returned to work a few days a week, but she still dropped Lily off at Mom's every morning before her shift. My mother didn't question it. She was thrilled to have her granddaughter around. The problem was that Emma started asking for more than time. She wanted money again. One evening, Dad came home to find Mom wiring Emma a few $100s for groceries. It became clear that helping had turned into full-on financial support. He didn't say much at first, hoping it would blow over. But then he found a letter from the bank about low account balances. That's when he told me the truth. They'd been dipping into their retirement savings to keep Emma afloat. I tried to talk to Mom again, carefully this time. I asked her how much she'd given Emma since the start of all this. She didn't answer. Instead, she said, "Family doesn't keep score." It was her favorite phrase lately, the same one she used when trying to justify every dollar that disappeared. To make things worse, Emma started showing up at family dinners again, acting like nothing had happened. She'd bring Lily, eat, talk about her stressful job, and leave before anyone could ask about money. Then one night, she showed up uninvited while I was having dinner with my parents. Mom's smile vanished the second she saw her. Emma told everyone she'd applied for government childcare assistance, but she needed a temporary address to receive the payments. She asked if she could use Mom's bank account for the direct deposit, claiming it was easier that way. I immediately knew something was off. A few weeks later, Dad received a notice about a deposit from a childcare program that neither of them had applied for. He called the number listed on the letter and found out the account tied to the payments was in Emma's name, but the money was being sent to Mom's account. He didn't explode, but the next morning he drove to Emma's place with the printout in his hand. I found out later he told her calmly that if she didn't fix it immediately, he'd have to report it as misuse. Emma broke down, insisting it was a misunderstanding, but he didn't budge. After that confrontation, things in the family started to unravel. Mom was furious at first, saying he was being too harsh, but when Emma accused her of making things complicated, something in Mom changed. She didn't defend her this time. She just looked tired. That weekend, she called me over. She didn't want to talk at first, but as soon as Dad left the room, she said quietly, "I think I've made things worse by helping." She admitted that Emma had grown dependent on her for everything, and that she'd ignored all the warning signs because it made her feel useful. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was control. Emma had learned that if she cried or mentioned Lily, Mom would give in instantly. She knew exactly how to keep her mother hooked. The following week, Mom tried to pull back again. She told Emma she couldn't afford to keep paying for things, that she needed to focus on her own bills. Emma stopped calling for a few days, then texted Dad asking for one last favor. When he didn't respond, she showed up at their house early one morning with Lily, saying daycare was closed and she needed to go to work. Mom hesitated, but she let her in. That one morning turned into a full day, and by the time Dad got home, Mom was back in the same loop, cleaning bottles, folding clothes, and pretending it was no big deal. A few days later, I invited my parents for dinner again, hoping to get them away from it all. I didn't tell Emma, but somehow she found out. She arrived at my house halfway through the meal with Lily in her arms, saying she didn't want to be alone. It turned dinner into chaos. After she left, Dad looked at me across the table and said, "We can't keep living like this." He told me he was giving Mom one more chance to step away completely before he took control of their finances himself. 2 nights later, I got a call from Mom. She was whispering like she didn't want anyone to hear. She said Emma had started blaming her for ruining everything, and that she didn't know how to fix it anymore. That was the first time I heard her admit it out loud. She finally saw that all her help had only made things worse. And deep down, she knew the only way out was to stop being the savior Emma depended on. But for someone who'd built her identity around taking care of others, walking away wasn't going to be easy. The tension between everyone finally came to a head after my dad found another unfamiliar charge on their bank statement. It wasn't a withdrawal this time, it was a payment to a credit card company neither of them used. When he looked deeper, he saw it was linked to an account under my mother's name. She didn't recognize it at first, but after a few calls, they discovered Emma had opened a store account using Mom's personal information. That was the breaking point. My dad froze the account that night and called me to come over the next morning. When I arrived, my mom was pacing the kitchen, clutching her phone, waiting for Emma to explain. Emma was already defensive, claiming it was just a mix-up. My dad didn't buy it. He told her if she didn't close the account herself, he would file a report. That was the first real confrontation our family had ever had. Emma started crying, my mom begged everyone to calm down, and my dad stayed stone quiet until Emma finally agreed to shut it down. But the damage was done. A few days later, while sorting through bills, my dad noticed more irregularities, small transfers that added up fast. My mom admitted she'd given Emma access to one of her debit cards months ago, just for emergencies, and had never taken it back. It wasn't a lot at first, gas, groceries, but it had slowly turned into hundreds of dollars. Dad sat her down and told her this had to stop. He froze that account too and set up new online passwords. My mom didn't argue this time. She just looked worn down, like she'd finally realized how deep she was in. A few days later, Emma showed up at my house, saying she needed to clear things up. She insisted her mother had offered that card willingly, that it wasn't stealing. I didn't get into it, but I told her plainly that her parents couldn't keep bailing her out. She laughed, said I didn't understand what it was like to have a child, and left before I could respond. That weekend, my parents decided to have a family meeting. They invited Emma and me over to their house. When Emma arrived, she was already angry, acting like she was being dragged into an intervention. She brought Lily along, probably thinking it would soften everyone up. Dad started the conversation calmly. He told Emma that they decided to stop all financial support completely. No more rent, no more cards, no more temporary help. He told her that if she needed advice or babysitting occasionally, that was fine, but the money flow was done. The moment he said it, Emma's expression hardened. She accused him of turning her own mother against her. Mom tried to calm her, but Emma wasn't listening. She packed Lily's things and stormed out, shouting that she'd never forgive them for humiliating her. After she left, the house felt heavy. Mom sat down at the table, staring at the door, and for the first time, she didn't rush after Emma. My dad poured himself a glass of water and said quietly, "That's the first boundary we've set in years." The next few days were quiet. Emma didn't call. My mom stayed home, cleaning and gardening, trying to stay busy. Then one morning, she got a call from her bank about unusual activity. Another store card had been opened in her name, this time at a home goods shop. The purchases were small but familiar. Baby supplies, groceries, toys. Dad handled it immediately. He called the store, reported it, and made sure the account was closed. Then he sat Mom down and told her to freeze her credit entirely. She agreed, and for the first time, she didn't try to make excuses for Emma. That night, I stopped by to check on them. My mom looked pale, sitting on the couch with a stack of papers in front of her, bank statements, letters, receipts. She was going through everything, marking down every transaction Emma had made over the past year. It was the first time she'd seen it all in one place. When she finished, she told my dad she wanted to start over. No more shared accounts, no more hidden transfers, no more guilt. She said she wanted to rebuild their savings and their peace. My dad just nodded. Over the next week, my mom began taking back small parts of her life. She joined a local group for retired women who volunteered at a nearby library. She stopped driving to Emma's every morning. She started cooking again. It lasted about 10 days before Emma broke the silence. She called my mom from an unknown number and said she was struggling to afford groceries again. Mom told her she couldn't send money, but she could help her find a food assistance program. Emma hung up. Later that day, my dad got a call from a grocery store employee. Emma had tried to use one of my mom's old cards. It had been declined because the account was frozen. The store manager only called because Mom's number was still on the card's contact file. That night, my dad made a decision. He gathered every piece of mail, document, and card that had Emma's name tied to theirs and locked it away. Then he told Mom, if she wants to fix her life, she'll have to do it without us. The next morning, I picked my parents up for breakfast. Mom seemed lighter, even joked a little. When I asked if she'd talked to Emma, she said, "Not yet. Maybe when she learns that love isn't supposed to cost this much." It was the first time I'd ever heard her talk about her daughter in past tense. For once, she wasn't talking about fixing Emma, she was talking about fixing herself. And though it had taken years, my mother was finally learning what real boundaries looked like, ones that didn't break the moment someone cried family. For a while, it looked like things were finally settling. My mom stopped hearing from Emma altogether. She said it was better that way, though she still kept her phone charged just in case. My dad took over handling their accounts, and they both started to relax again. But peace in our family never seemed to last long. About a month after the last confrontation, a stack of letters arrived at my parents' house. Bills from a daycare Emma had been using. Every envelope had my mother's address listed as the billing contact. When Dad opened one, it showed 2 months of unpaid balances. The total wasn't huge, but it was clear Emma had listed Mom as a guarantor without telling her. Dad called the daycare and explained the situation. They confirmed that Emma had written Linda's name under alternate contact and used their address for billing. They couldn't remove it without Emma's approval, but they promised to flag it as disputed. My mother didn't say a word during the call. She just sat there staring at the letter like she couldn't believe it. 2 days later, Emma showed up at their doorstep with Lily. She didn't call first, didn't even knock properly, just walked in like she still lived there. She said her apartment lease had ended, and she needed to stay for a few nights until she figured things out. My dad looked ready to refuse, but Mom told him they couldn't turn her away with a toddler. They agreed on clear conditions. Emma could stay for 1 week, no money would change hands, and Mom wasn't going to be babysitting every day. Emma nodded, promised to follow the rules, and for a short time it worked. By the 3rd day, the pattern returned. Emma started leaving Lily with my mom just for an hour while she ran errands that turned into half a day. She began using my parents' food, their laundry, and even logged into their streaming accounts. When Dad reminded her about the 1-week rule, she said she was looking for apartments but hadn't found the right one yet. I visited that weekend and found my mom doing dishes while Lily ran around the living room. Emma was upstairs taking a nap. My dad was outside fixing the fence, clearly trying to stay calm. That night, after Emma went to bed, he told me he couldn't keep living like a guest in his own home. The next morning, things boiled over. Mom came downstairs to find Lily's toys scattered everywhere, and Emma gone. She had left a note saying she'd be back later, but it was already past noon. When Emma finally returned, Dad told her they needed to talk. He reminded her of the week limit and said she needed to find other arrangements. Emma didn't take it well. She accused them of abandoning a single mother, claimed they didn't care about their own grandchild, and packed her things angrily. Before she left, she told Mom she'd never forgive them. Once the door closed, my mom sat on the couch in silence. She didn't cry this time. She just looked tired in a way that said she'd finally run out of energy to fix what was broken. The following weeks were quieter than they'd been in years. Mom started sleeping better. She began spending her mornings in the garden and evenings reading with Dad. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. Friends who used to envy her for being such a devoted grandmother started hearing the real story. Some expressed shock, others sympathy, but a few admitted they'd seen signs long ago that Emma had always been good at getting what she wanted. One afternoon, my mom and I went shopping together for the first time in months. She stopped by the baby section, out of habit, touched a small dress, and then quietly walked past it. She didn't buy anything for Lily that day. Instead, she bought herself a new pair of gardening gloves and a book. It was small, but it meant something. Meanwhile, Emma moved into a smaller apartment closer to her job. I know because she sent me her new address through a short text that didn't say anything else. I didn't respond. Neither did my parents. Weeks later, I visited my parents for dinner. The house felt lighter. There were no baby toys, no laundry baskets, no exhaustion hanging in the air. Mom had cooked her favorite roast, and Dad was joking again. It was like the life they had before all the chaos was slowly returning. But the peace wasn't total. Every once in a while, Emma would leave a voicemail asking for just one more favor. My mom never replied. She saved them all in her phone, unread, and eventually stopped checking. Then one evening, my dad got a call from an unknown number. It was a social worker, verifying information Emma had listed for a childcare subsidy. Apparently, Emma had used Mom's phone number as a reference. My dad corrected the record immediately and made it clear they weren't financially responsible. When he told Mom, she just nodded and said, "I guess she's still learning the hard way." As the months went on, Emma's calls became less frequent. Eventually, she stopped reaching out altogether. My mom started hosting Sunday dinners again, just me, Dad, and Jason. She laughed more, slept more, and talked about retirement plans instead of daycare schedules. For the first time, the conversation at the table wasn't about Emma or Lily. It was about their lives, the ones they'd almost lost to constant rescuing. And though no one said it out loud, we all understood the quiet truth sitting between us. My mother's love had built the trap, but learning to say no was what finally set her free. Weeks passed with no word from Emma. My mother didn't mention her name once, and my dad didn't ask about her. The silence that used to make my mom anxious started feeling like peace. She joined a local book club, started meeting a few old friends for coffee again, and spent most afternoons in the garden she'd neglected for years. My dad joked that the tomato plants were finally getting more attention than Emma ever did. For the first time in a long while, their house looked alive again. My mom cooked dinners that weren't rushed. My dad played his old records, and their evenings were spent talking instead of arguing. It almost felt like they had reclaimed their marriage from the chaos that had taken it over. Then, one evening after dinner, the phone rang. It was Emma. My mom froze when she saw the caller ID. After a long moment, she picked up. Emma said daycare had called. She was running late from work and needed someone to pick up Lily just this once. My mom hesitated, but agreed. She told my dad it was harmless, a quick favor. The next week, Emma called again. This time, she needed help because Lily had a cold and couldn't go to daycare. My mom spent the entire day at Emma's apartment, cleaning, cooking soup, and watching Lily. It happened again the following week. Emma needed a ride to the doctor, then a babysitter for a few hours while she handled something important. My dad warned her gently not to fall back into old habits. My mom promised she wouldn't, but I could tell she was already slipping. Each small favor sounded harmless on its own, but the pattern was too familiar. After one especially long day, my mom came home late and sat down on the couch, staring at her hands. She told my dad that she realized she'd been right back where she started, tired, overextended, and trying to fix a problem that wasn't hers. That night, she admitted something she'd never said before. Every time she rescued Emma, she wasn't helping her. She was keeping her dependent. The next time Emma called, my mom's tone was different. She listened, then calmly said she couldn't babysit during work hours anymore. She told Emma she needed to rely on the daycare program she was already paying for. Emma didn't take it well. She accused my mom of turning her back on family, and even blamed me for changing her. My mom didn't argue. She just ended the call and turned off her phone. My dad told me about it the next day, and I could hear the pride in his voice. He said it was the first time my mother had stood her ground without guilt or tears. From then on, they didn't hear from Emma for weeks. During that time, my mom kept busy. She started teaching a small gardening class at the community center and joined a weekend market group where she sold herbs and potted plants. My dad started calling their weekends their second retirement. A month later, Emma showed up unexpectedly on a Saturday morning. She had Lily with her, but there was no panic in her voice this time. She said she'd qualified for a childcare subsidy through her job and was finally managing her bills. My mom invited her in for coffee, and they talked not about money, not about help, just small, normal things. Lily played quietly on the floor, and when it was time to leave, my mom gave her a small toy from her old collection, but didn't offer to babysit again. It was the calmest visit they'd ever had. After that, things started to shift in a way none of us expected. Emma began handling her responsibilities on her own. She still struggled sometimes, late rent notices, long work hours, but she didn't run to my mom for every setback. My parents stayed polite but distant, letting her figure life out on her own terms. A few weeks later, I joined my parents for lunch at their house. The atmosphere was lighter than it had been in years. There was no tension, no guilt, no endless talk about Emma's needs. My mom made roast chicken, my dad opened a bottle of wine, and we spent the afternoon talking about vacations, gardening, and old neighbors. At one point, my dad joked that mom used to warn me I'd regret not having kids, but now she understood what it meant to carry someone else's problems, like a full-time job. My mom laughed. not bitterly, just quietly, and said that some lessons come the hard way. When I left that evening, the sun was setting over their porch. My parents were sitting side by side with their coffee cups, talking about what they might plant next season. For the first time in years, there wasn't a crisis waiting for them, just peace. It wasn't the kind of ending you see in movies. No dramatic apology, no family reunion. Just two people who finally learned that love doesn't mean losing yourself to someone else's mistakes. And somewhere across town, my sister was learning the same truth on her own. One bill, one long day, one grown-up decision at a time.